Now it's time to work on the lower boot cowls again. I thought I had those pretty much done, but then as I got nearly done with the upper boot cowl, I realized I didn't anticipate and didn't do anything with these engine cowl brackets, the mounts. The mounts for the engine cowl attach here, and they're just 3/4 inch bent angles that come up and out, and that's what the channels that the engine cowling attach to mount on. They have to be placed pretty close, and like I said, I didn't anticipate that. I went ahead and did all of this, drilled all these holes and everything without taking that into consideration. I did bring the old boot cowl down here and take some measurements off of it and laid it out on this firewall, off the old firewall, and laid it out on this firewall. And when I did, I realized that Atlee Dodge had punched dimples in this firewall to locate those. It made it a lot easier to locate it. Even though my measurements were almost perfect on that, it would this brings it out hopefully too perfect. It should be in the right spot. Oh, anyway, I took this left side lower boot cowl off, drilled out these 2 dimple holes here, and then one of the problems that I had was when I laid out these holes, one of the mounting holes for the boot cowl wound up being right in line with the bracket. So you'd see one of the rivet holes, it was almost right, but one of the rivet holes in this nut plate that was on there was just right in line with that bracket. Anticipating that I might have trouble with these mounts here for these nut plates, I did get some wider strips here. This is 1 inch wide instead of 3/4 inch wide, and it just as well that I did, because I can use these on this lower engine cowl. And what I did here was went ahead and took that nut plate off, of course, and then I set this up for a single ear nut plate. It's got 1 ear that goes out and 2 rivets on it. So I set that up for that. That'll go in just like that. So I set this up, this bracket up, and first thing I did wrong on the brackets was I overbent them. I had them bent in a 90-degree angle, and that didn't work. They had to be, the angle had to be, increased. So it's a more angle, I don't know what that is, 100 degrees or something like that, to match up with the angle that the boot cowl comes out to meet that panel on the back side there. So I did that. I drilled these holes, locator holes out, these attach holes out on the firewall, and then held this bracket up in there. I was able to get it to line up here with these holes, and it wide enough that I could get it to come out to where this lower boot cowl screw, the mount screw, will still line up in this bracket. And then I drilled it out for a nut plate, a number 8 nut plate, and I've got these drilled out for number 8 nut plates, 832 nut plates. The one here is real close to the bend. That one takes a single ear, and then this one I'll do a double ear here. And then these are where the boot cowl will attach to it, will tie into it, and those will be number 6s. One of the other difficulties I ran into that is there's a strut, engine mount stringer that goes right in there, so I had to relieve this corner a little bit for that engine mount stringer. So I've got this pretty much set up to go on there now. That'll go on just like that. We'll put number screws in here in the firewall, and then the boot cowl, lower boot cowl will mount here, and then these 2 holes, and I'll have a doubler on the lower boot cowl like I did the upper boot cowl to make up for the thickness of this firewall as it comes back here. So that's coming along nicely. I've got these holes all located, drilled, countersunk, deburred, and so they're ready to put the nut plates on them, and then I'll ream these holes out for clearance holes for number 8 screws. Once this is located in here, I'll locate it in using number 8 screws on the firewall here, and then transfer these holes over to the boot cowl. And it's going to be a stronger mount than what the original was on there. it only came down on the firewall one screw hole. There were two screw holes here, two screws that went into the firewall for the engine cowling mount portion of it, but there was only one screw. It only came down this far on the firewall, so this will come down farther on the firewall, and then with the doubler on it, it's going to be real strong, stronger than the original was. Okay, that bracket is done. Got the nut plates riveted on, holes all chamfered out. Put the number 8 screws in here, and it's set up on location. Now we'll put the boot cowl on there and line up where these two holes go, where the screws attach into there for the lower boot cowl section. And we'll make a doubler plate and put on the inside of the boot cowl, and then we'll work on the right side. Put the bracket in there, and then I put this left-hand boot cowl panel on there to check it out, and I'd had the bracket kind of overbent or underbent, whatever. I'd bent them 90, and then I brought them back out again, and so when I looked at it, I run a straight edge between here and where this panel attaches back there, and I thought I'd underbent it, brought it back out too far from 90. So I took it down to the shop and drilled these holes out and to mount those nut plates in. I bent it back a little bit. Well, when I mounted it up here and put this boot cowl panel on there, turned out that it wasn't quite enough. It was too close to 90. So I took that off and just took it over to the anvil with a hammer and tuned it up a little bit, got it to come out where it should be. I thought I could back drill through those nut plates to locate the holes that go into the boot cowl panel here, but I couldn't get the drill in there to back drill it. I was able to mark the holes, so I've got those marked. I'll take the panel off again and drill those holes out. Got the left-hand boot cowl panel mounted up there again. I drilled the holes here for that attachment bracket, and everything's all screwed down. That's it. It's this is the two number 6 screws that go in through the boot cowl into that bracket. Well, everything looks good there, and it all fits up like it's supposed to. Now I've got to make a doubler for that, like I did on the top. The lower left bracket, a mounting bracket for the engine cowling, is all done and installed. These are the two number 8 screws going through the firewall. I've got the holes drilled out in here for the number 6 screws for the left-hand boot cowl panel. I've got the left-hand boot cowl off, and I made up a doubler plate for it. I got those all drilled out and cleaned up, and I took the protective coating off of both pieces, both the doubler and the boot cowl itself. I've got those washed down with paint thinner and with lacquer thinner, and then I scrubbed them with Alumiprep and etched them, and now they're down in the shop drying out. I started the fire in the stove in the shop, got them in there drying out, and I mixed up some of the primer, and it's sitting there doing its dwell time. It's got to dwell for 30 minutes, and since it's chilly, I'll let it go a little bit longer than that. I'll get those painted up and let them cure, and then tomorrow I'll be able to rivet that panel on there, that doubler plate on there, and then put another coat of primer on it. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and take the screws out of this right hand panel and start setting up this bracket for this lower right side for the engine cowling. And now I have to cut off a little bit of this tang on this L bracket here to get it to fit in. There's a post that goes up here, part of this boxed in area for the engine mount, and this thing runs up against it on this lower side. The front side, the top, there was no problem with that, but these lower ones all run into that. And I could have pulled these this way a little bit, or the 3/4 inch ones might have fit, but I've got to have these wider ones and have it set down slightly this direction so that I can get a nut plate on this for this screw that I've got goes in through the firewall right here. That bracket is mounted. That's the lower right bracket. I got to put the skin back on there, and then locate these holes for these two screws here, these two number 6s. Now that one went pretty smooth. That's kind of the way that works, I guess. But the last one you do works out pretty smooth. Worked out all the kinks. Then we're done. But anyway, that one's there. That one's done. We're on, and the paint primer is drying on the left-hand panel, so we can get it riveted tomorrow and get the holes located for this one and on the right side, and then paint that panel. Then we should be pretty much done with the boot cowl.